Welcome to a new video on my home automation channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Sonoff's first, or iTead's first IP camera. This unit was supplied to me by iTead free of charge for this review video. And as you know, I quite like cameras, and I have quite a few from different brands. And it is always nice to have a device which is in the same ecosystem. If you have a lot of Sonoff products, then it's good that if your IP camera or your cameras can be in the same ecosystem, so you don't have to switch between two different apps. And I think that was probably the reason why they have decided to roll their own IP cameras. I mean, the market is absolutely flooded with IP cameras, and they are getting quite cheap. And this one, if I remember correctly, this is about $30 US. I think it's considered to be quite a cheap camera. Given the fact that it rotates. It has all the rotating functionality, so it's not a fixed camera. It works on wireless, but it also works on wired. It has an SD card slot, so you can store the footage locally on the SD card. And since I mentioned the price, you just have to be aware that there are some really cheap IP cameras on the market, not necessarily bad, but usually the very cheap cameras have a caveat. Because the way the manufacturer is trying to get some more money out of you is that those cameras would upload the footage to some cloud service, so for example Amazon Cloud, and the only way you would be able to review your old footage is if you pay a monthly subscription to the company, which then pays for Amazon and any of the cloud providers. So you might be getting an IP camera which is sort of the similar price as this one, but then you would have to pay like 5 or 10 US monthly just to be able to have access to your feed. Otherwise you can only look at the live feed. So that's obviously limitation, but that's how their business model is designed. Whereas here you have a camera which, well, of course you pay for once, and then, well, sort of it's free to use. You have access it over your local internet. You also have access to the feed when you are on mobile data, and of course the footage is getting stored locally. So it doesn't appear to go to the cloud. So all your data is stored here. Well, of course, as far as I can tell. And clearly from the design, you can see that this is an indoor camera. And besides the rotating function, it also supports two-way audio, which is, I think, it's getting pretty much the standard nowadays. When you buy the product, you are getting the camera in this box, and then you need to get your adapter separately. Presumably this is because they have adapters for different markets. Obviously I have the European model, and this is just like a 5-volt power brick. I think it says, 5-volt 1200 milliamp hours. So yeah, nothing really fancy. The only problem is, well, my problem is that it terminates in a barrel jack, so it's not a micro USB socket. Otherwise you could have used a phone charger as well, but because of this reason you need to buy the adapter unless you have this specific plug. It is not an awfully complicated kit. The camera comes in one piece. I mean, this top part folds down when you take it out of the box, and it's covered in this protective material. And besides that, you are getting a small instruction leaflet, very, very brief one. And yeah, and of course it is in multi-language, so it's really, a small amount of information, but of course you can have the full manual online. And you are also getting some mounting hardware, so a couple of screws, and you are getting this plate as well, because as we are going to see, I think the best installation for this one, if it's mounted on the ceiling, and then this bracket just clips on, so it is easy to remove. So obviously you screw this bracket into the ceiling, and then you clip the camera on. And the reason I'm saying that it's, I think it's probably best suited if it's on the ceiling, because the camera is not able to point downwards. So unless, I think it just makes more sense if it's on the ceiling, because then you can pretty much rotate 360 and also pan sort of like, 180 degrees that way. So you can see directly underneath itself, and then sort of like every direction. Because I have it on the table, sometimes I wish I could tilt more, down, look sort of like under itself, but it can't. But it's, it's not a big deal. It's just something that you might need to consider. But it has some feet, so it was clearly designed to sit on the table as well. If you look around the camera, so in this top rotating part we have the lens, and then we have some that's probably the infrared receiver. There are some infrared LEDs here, so it has night vision and the IR filter. Of course, this top section rotates around, and also the head tilts. And the only other thing we have here, well, we have some grills, so that's probably for the speakers, and the microphone is probably on the top. We have the barrel jack for the power, so this is 5 volts. You have a micro SD card to store the videos. You have to supply your own, it doesn't come in a kit, but you also have network. So if you want to power it from the network, you can just plug it in like here. I don't think it supports power over Ethernet. It wasn't mentioned in the documentation, and quite frankly, I don't have power over Ethernet, so I couldn't test it. This was the first device that I had to power using sound pairing, and that's what you're going to see here. And this model also follows one of the pretty much the trend nowadays, that because this unit has a speaker, then everything, all the instructions are going to be spoken by this device. So it's going to talk to you in English in a slightly Chinese accent, that go to your app, follow the pairing procedure. And then the pairing procedure is pretty much the same. You press the plus button in the app, and then you select sound pairing, and it's going to ask for your Wi-Fi credentials. And when you click pairing, then the phone is going to beep through the settings to the camera in a really loud, like high pitch noise, and it's going to carry on for about 2 minutes until the camera actually connects to the Wi-Fi. It's quite annoying, but you only have to do it once, so that's fine. So I've now plugged in the adapter, and all I have to do, well, it's already paired to my app, so all I have to do is to plug in the power, and we just have to wait for a little. And in the meantime, I'm just going to get the app running on my phone.
Please wait for internet connecting. Internet connected. Welcome to use cloud camera.
So as you could hear, well, hopefully you could hear it. I think initially it was quite loud, but probably because I've gone into the settings for the first time, I've turned the volume slightly down. So it's not so loud. So it's just going to say that, please wait for internet connecting, and then once it is connected, actually it's not Chinese accent, I was wrong about that one. But once you have that, the camera itself appears in the eWelink app, just like any of the eWelink device. So it's unlike the mobile camera option that they have released about 1.5 years ago, where you would have, well, you would still have the camera, I think, as a separate device somewhere, but mainly you would assign it to a device. So when you switch on your light, then you have the feed, which I guess it's of the same room or something. But here the camera is just, it's just another device. And if I click on it, then I have the whole camera image loads, and we just have to wait for a couple of seconds for the feed to come on as well. If you have seen a camera app, then I don't really have to say too much about it. You have the wheel where you can control the camera, so you can just make it rotate. So now you can see me. And by the way, I don't know if you can hear anything. I think the reason you can't hear anything, because it's absolutely silent. So it is really, really nice. And as you can see, it sort of points downwards. Maybe that's just fine. And then if I do up, then then it goes up. The control is a little bit quirky, because the way it works is that you press on one of the controls, but it would only move once. That's probably to handle latency. So if you want to, pan, by the degree, then basically you just have to click on the corresponding control a couple of times. And of course there are some delays, so sometimes you overshoot, sometimes you undershoot. I do remember that I tested some IP cameras a long time ago, which had a couple of numbers. You can have some preset locations. So instead of just panning to certain places around your house or your room, you can just call on those presets and the camera will automatically move to that location. That would be quite nice. But I think you have the idea now, and then you can see what the sort of the range of the motion is. The camera, or this top part, can obviously lie flat, so it can, if it's sort of like on the ceiling, it can look directly underneath itself, and it can tilt that much down. And if I pan further that way, no, I want it the other way. Then you can see the rest of the room. Yeah, it's a very sunny day, so I think we are going to have issues coping with the different light conditions. But as you can see, it, you know, sort of like auto adjust the gain. So as soon as it sort of pans into the room, then it becomes lighter again. And if I pan outside where there is a huge amount of sun, then it's just going to darken the background, and you know, it's going to look natural again. If you look at the features on the screen, you can see that it's on the top we have some stats on the frame rate and the bit rate as well. And it says around 9 or 10 frames per second, and even if I download the footage from the camera, it's probably going to say that it's only recording 9 or 10 frames per second. It's recording in full HD, but of course the frame rate is lower, so this is probably how they get away with using like a cheaper image sensor. I think you know, the image looks okay, especially on the phone screen as well, and you have the option to change between standard definition and high definition video feed. You can see a little bit of difference, but I think for phone the standard definition is probably going to be good enough. And you also have an indication how much bandwidth you are using, and I have to say it is quite low. So, and that's probably because of the low frame rate that they are using, but because of the really low bandwidth, I think it's going to perform quite well in if you are on the mobile data. Looking further on the settings, we have share, so the usual share functionality. We have the talk, so that's the two-way audio. I'm going to turn it in. We might get an echo or a feedback. Hello. I think you get the idea. Yeah, we are getting a lot of feedback, but you can talk to the device and it takes some time to turn off. Oh, actually, sorry. You can turn on the talk, and you can turn on the camera as well. The speaker as well. So it is possible to only listen to what's happening on the other side. And the record video and the snapshot functionality is to capture images locally. So if I click on the snapshot, then it will create a snapshot which is added to my saved album, and pretty much the same with the recording as well. And you can turn full screen. It's a nice full screen, but I won't be able to rotate the camera in post-production, or I just wouldn't. I would just keep it like that. So that's it. I think you are getting the basic transport controls, and it seems to be working fine. For me, it works pretty much the same even if I'm on the local Wi-Fi or in mobile data, so I don't see a huge amount of lag. The picture looks quite nice, and by the way, I'm just going to crop in some footage that I've taken from the SD card itself. Some of them are going to be like full screen, so you can see the actual quality, and then some of them are just going to be smaller ones. I've placed this camera in my study for a couple of weeks, so I have a lot of sort of similar footage that I sit in the desk and work, and nothing really exciting, but I think that would be the main purpose of this device anyway. So the next thing is, if I go into the settings, well, first of all, I have the albums. This is where I can see all the local recordings that I have done. So these are not the recordings done on the camera, but the things that I have done where I press the record video and the snapshot. Well, the snapshot goes into the camera reel, but in the album you can see the recordings. And let's go into settings. So we have quite a few options here. So first of all, we have the camera name, we have a firmware version. It looks like that they are not, these cameras would have a separate firmware numbers. It's not like 3 point something, but I don't think it's a big issue. The next one is rotate. You would use that if you are mounting the cameras on the ceiling, so to flip the image so nothing is upside down. Next one, motion detection. So the way you would create recordings on the camera on the SD card is by motion detection. And if you have seen any of my previous IP camera videos, you know that I don't really like motion detection a lot, but definitely not image-based motion detection, because I think it's a lot of hit and miss. And I've seen footage where I was trying to do motion detection and it sort of failed miserably. But I also said that it usually fails miserably if you are trying to do it outside. But because this is an indoor camera, I think it's going to perform a lot better here. And at the moment I set the motion detection to medium, and I have to say that I think it's working fine. I have placed it in the study, and it mostly creates recordings when I go in or I move out or I move around in the study. So it doesn't create blank recordings where nothing really is moving, but maybe the sun is going in and out. So I think after all, this motion detection is quite useful or usable. And this camera is not designed to create recordings 24/7, so it's more these small clips that happens on motion. You can't control it how long the clip is going to be, so that's all defaulted in the firmware. The only other thing you can do is you can do this sound alert, and I think this is absolutely annoying because all this is going to do is once it detects motion and creates a recording, it's also going to sound some alarm. And let me just not test it. So I don't think anyone would use that on, well, it's like, yeah, somebody comes in your door and then this alarm goes on. Not that it's going to deter anyone, but, well, maybe somebody likes these features. I'm not sure. The next one is view local videos and local record. Sorry, I was wrong. I said that the only way to record videos if you have motion detection, but no, you can enable local recording as well. And when the app says local, it means local, meaning on that SD card. So it's not local to the phone that you are holding. And this is where you can look at the recordings as well. And of course, it's going to take some time until it loads, because it's just going to show you a huge list of recordings. You can't filter on date or anything else, and it's just going to show these motion detection videos. So in order to look at the footage, you actually have to go in there and then see. And it's a very basic functionality, so you're not getting, as you can see.
And at the moment, I set the motion detection to
This is the one that I've just created, and it records sounds as well. So you don't have an option here to download or do anything with it, so you can just review it. And of course, you can always take out the SD card, you put it into the laptop, and these recordings are going to be in separate files. And the files are going to be in separate folders. So I think there is going to be a separate folder for day, every month. So it's quite easy to look at the footage that you are looking after. And I've checked in VLC, and the videos are H.264 codecs, and so around 10 frames per second, full HD, and mono 8 kilohertz audio. So yeah, the audio is fairly basic, but I think it's good for this purpose. So these are the local videos, and yeah, I mean, there's going to be loads of them. Of course, the most recent one is on the top. So if you want to review recent videos, you just have to come here and look at it. Unless you have a prolonged motion, if you have the cameras installed in a way where just people move by, it will only create really short clips, and it means that even like in a decent card, I mean, this is probably not the highest capacity one. I think it's probably like a 16 gig. It will contain like hundreds of thousands of recordings. At the bottom of the screen, we see some information about the device, so the manufacturer, the model, the device ID. But next, let's go into the more settings, because we have some more stuff in here. So you have the speaker volume. You can change it in 3 different settings. You also have a microphone volume. That probably means microphone sensitivity. That's the microphone sensitivity. So this is probably to filter out some interference with either the 60 Hertz or the 50 Hertz mains network. You can set time zone as well. That obviously makes sense because the timestamp is written on the recordings. And you can format the card, you can restart the camera. And I left the Rtsp at last because with most vendors, especially if you're buying really cheap cameras, they try to lock you into their ecosystem. But actually what iTead has done is this camera, well, you have to turn it on separately, but it can supply its own Rtsp feed. So if you have a network recorder or like a desktop app which can access Rtsp feeds, then you can view the feed of your camera in your app or in a third-party app, or also in a desktop app, and do all sorts of things with it. I mean, most of the network recorders would be able to record footage from an Rtsp stream. So instead of using the built-in SD card, it can record to your network recorder, and then you can integrate this camera into other camera brands in your home. So I think it is actually quite nice. And you can change the settings here. So of course it would have an IP address, and you have an account and a password. And when you create the Rtsp link, it's going to give you the URL of the stream. And if you just put this URL, for example, in VLC, then you can view the footage on your desktop computer as well. So actually, I think it's quite nice, because even if you don't like the eWelink app, still you are getting a $30 IP camera which has Rtsp, so it can be integrated to anything, and you don't have to pay for any cloud service. So I think that's nice. Whenever I review a new product, I usually go into the scenes so I can see what sort of triggers and actions the device supports. So let me set up a new scene. Well, I'm not going to finish it, I'm just going to test it. So if I try to look at the triggers, so if I click here on Add, and if I want to select a device, I want to know if I can set up a trigger based on the IP camera. But if I scroll here, I can see, well, that's the whole thing. I can't see the camera here. So unfortunately, I can't set up a trigger on the camera itself. Honestly, I think it would make sense because it has the motion detection built in. I think it would make sense if you can set up a trigger in case the motion is detected on this camera, or maybe when night is detected or daylight is detected, because obviously you can hear the IR filter clicking whenever it's getting too dark or getting light in the camera. So those could be useful features that somebody might want to integrate into a scene. But yeah, unfortunately it's not available. At least it's not available yet. Maybe it's going to be added later. And on the perform side, I think it's going to be pretty much the same thing. So we can't see the camera in here. By the way, what is the name? Okay, I just named it as camera. So at the moment it looks like just a standalone camera. So the only real benefit that the eWelink camera has, or the Sonoff camera has, that it's in the Sonoff app, so you don't have to switch in between apps. But you can't sort of like integrate it with any of the Sonoff device using the scenes, or at least not at the moment. Of course you have the Rtsp, so that's nice. That would give you a couple of integration options with third-party components and elements. And this concludes my review of the Sonoff IP camera. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.